On my 64th birthday, my daughter-in-law poured red wine down my $3,000 dress and said, "Now you look as cheap as you are." Everyone laughed, even my son. That night, I didn't cry. I smiled. Because when they thought they had humiliated me, they had just reignited something I thought had died long ago: my power. The gallery shimmered beneath track lights like a frozen wave of money. Vivian Roth, 66, widow of a collector and survivor of too many dinner galas, adjusted the single strand of pearls resting on her collarbone. Her son's fiancée, Brielle Hart, was already working the room sleek in ivory, her laugh pitched to Carrie. A photographer asked Vivian to turn toward the art. She smiled, poised, while Brielle approached carrying 2 glasses of deep red Cabernet. "You must be parched, Vivian," she said, "syrup over steel." The floor cable lay right where she wanted it. One heel caught. The wine erupted crimson, cascading down navy silk. The crowd inhaled as one. Brielle gasped theatrically, hand to chest. "Oh no, I'm so clumsy." Then lower, soft enough for only Vivian vintage belongs in storage. Laughter rippled from somewhere behind them. Even Evan, Vivian's own son, stared at his phone instead of her face. Vivian placed her empty flute on a pedestal as if returning evidence. Her voice rang clean through the white space. "Thank you for the illumination." Then she walked out, the wet silk clinging cold against her skin. In the car, city lights streaked across the glass like brushstrokes. The chauffeur murmured, "Ma'am, shall I take you home?" "Yes," she said. "Home." And then to the cleaners. But she wasn't thinking about the dress. She was thinking about dirt that doesn't wash out. At her desk that night, she slid open a drawer labeled "Due Diligence." The folder still smelled faintly of her late husband's cologne. "Let's see what kind of masterpiece you are, Brielle," she whispered, powering up the laptop. The next morning, sunlight spilled through Vivian's penthouse like an interrogation lamp. On her marble table lay the blue garment bag, the wine stain now a dark fossil in silk. She didn't rush to clean it. Some things deserved to be studied first. Her laptop hummed awake. Brielle Hart, she typed, sipping black coffee that tasted like focus. In a world where people curated their lives more carefully than museums, Vivian knew every con left fingerprints, digital ones. LinkedIn. Resume. Too perfect. She scrolled. Marketing coordinator in Tennessee, creative director in Michigan, consultant in New York. Each job ended the same way, seeking new opportunities. The dates blurred like smudged signatures. Vivian opened the metadata noting gaps: 6 months here, 8 there. She saved screenshots, organized them into a folder named Provenance. Next, the social accounts. Brielle smiling beside different men, always expensive dinners, always captions about fresh starts. No family, no college friends, only surface reflections. Vivian leaned closer to the screen. The woman reinvented herself every year like a limited edition. Her phone buzzed. A text from Evan Mom: "Brielle feels awful. Please don't make this bigger than it was." Vivian typed, then deleted. Typed again. "Of course, darling. I just hope she's truly sorry." When she hit send, the faintest smile curved her mouth, cool, deliberate. If Brielle wanted to play in the world of appearances, Vivian would play too. Only she'd bring receipts. Outside traffic murmured below 5th Avenue. Vivian turned the dress inside out, pressing her finger along the seam of the stain. "You left your mark," she murmured. "Now I'll find where it came from." She opened a new spreadsheet. Title: The Hart Collection. Vivian heard the elevator before the bell rang. Evan's voice followed, hesitant, polite, guilty. He stepped in, holding a bouquet of grocery tulips wrapped in plastic that crinkled like an apology. "Brielle feels terrible, Mom," he began. "She didn't mean to embarrass you. Everyone saw it was an accident." Vivian gestured toward the table. On it sat a folder neatly labeled Transfers. "Since Robert's passing." "I know," she said softly. "Accidents happen. So do patterns. Evan blinked. What's this receipts? He frowned, defensive. We said we'd pay it back eventually. Yo. He shifted, uncomfortable in his tailored guilt. Brielle just wants us to build our life. You know how hard things. Vivian's tone stayed calm. Your father built everything we had on honesty, not handouts. Tell me, Evan, does Brielle know that he didn't answer? The silence stretched until it felt like a verdict. Finally, he muttered. You're reading too much into one mistake. One mistake, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. I hope so. Because I've started a list. Evan set the tulips down and left without another word. The plastic wrapper sighed in the still air. Vivian looked at the flowers, cheap, fragile, temporary. They'd wilt before the stain faded from silk. She turned back to her laptop, adding a new tab under the Heart Collection Item 2, Financial Dependency Active. Then almost kindly, she whispered, Let's see how deep your collection runs, dear. Vivian believed in manners as both shield and sword, so when she called Lydia, Hart Brielle's mother, she used the gentlest tone possible. Tea would be lovely. Lydia had chirped, her voice dripping with old Park Slope charm. The brownstones smelled of lilac polish and quiet ambition. Pearls, floral dress, flawless smile, Lydia looked like a woman who had practiced elegance until it became armor. Such a shame about your gown. Lydia began pouring tea into bone china cups. Brielle was devastated. Vivian stirred her cup once, slowly. Yes, she said, it was an accident, though she seemed rather composed for someone devastated. Lydia's lashes flickered. My daughter has impeccable self-control. She takes after me. Vivian smiled thinly. I can see that. She let the silence breathe just long enough before placing a small folder beside her saucer. I came across some articles about your family's time in Tennessee. Quite eventful. The teacup froze midair. Lydia tried to recover with a laugh. Old gossip. You know how small towns are. Of course, Vivian said, voice velvet over granite, though the article about Councilman James Bradley didn't sound like gossip. Nor did the bankruptcy filings from her second husband, Marcus Chen. Tell me, Lydia, were those men also clumsy with wine? For the first time, the older woman's smile cracked. Color drained from her cheeks, leaving her porcelain and frightened. I don't know what you think you're implying. Oh, I'm not implying anything, Vivian interrupted softly. I'm documenting. Provenance matters after all. A piece's history determines its value. Lydia set the cup down, hands trembling just slightly. You should leave, she whispered. Vivian rose, smooth as a closing curtain. Thank you for the tea. It was enlightening. At the doorway, she paused, eyes glinting like glass under light. You've raised quite the artist, Mrs. Hart. But I'm afraid I've seen her work before, different names, same brushstrokes. Outside, the air felt colder, sharper. Vivian walked toward the waiting car, already rehearsing the next step. If Lydia was the gallery that birthed Brielle's art of deceit, it was time to follow the entire exhibit. Vivian Roth had once funded restorations that took months, layer by layer, solvent by solvent. Now she applied the same patience to truth. She cleared her desk, tied her silver hair, and began the excavation. First stop, Tennessee Court Database. The interface was prehistoric, but gossip aged well in public record. Bradley James, plaintiff. Hart Brielle, defendant. Filed under financial impropriety. The docket number alone made her pulse sharpen. Sealed settlement, no charges. The same month, Brielle's Facebook announced new beginnings. Vivian whispered, I bet. Next, Ohio. Marcus Chen. Restaurateur divorce decree citing financial stress. She pulled PDFs, highlighted lines, unauthorized business withdrawals. By the time she reached page 6, she'd seen enough. Same handwriting on the signature block, an elegant loop over the H. She added both names to her timeline board. Red thread, Red wine? Red flags. Then she dove into employment records. Morrison and Associates terminated for inconsistencies in expense documentation. Bradley Marketing discharged after client card misuse. A pattern so symmetrical it could hang in a gallery. Vivian printed everything. By midnight, the once pristine study had transformed into a private exhibition of deceit. Court documents like Canvas's receipts as brushstrokes. She moved through them, slowly curating her findings. Title cards. Marriage, wide 2018-2020, marriage. 2, 2021-2023, current installation Roth. Her printer coughed its final page, a corporate memo dated 6 months ago, naming Brielle terminated during restructuring. Vivian smiled faintly, reframed again. A text from Evan lit the screen. "Mom, please stop digging. You're making things worse." She stared at the words until they blurred. Then she replied, "I restore what's been damaged. It's what I do." At 2:14 a.m., she pushed back her chair, surveying the board like a museum director previewing an unholy collection. There it was, her daughter-in-law's entire career stitched together from men and money. On the bottom corner of the corkboard, Vivian pinned a new label, written in her calm archivist hand, "Medium Human Deception." Condition, active deterioration. Next action, authentication through confrontation. She turned off the lamp. Only the red indicator of the printer glowed tiny, steady, accusing. Vivian allowed herself one last look at the wine-stained jacket hanging by the door. "You'll make a fine exhibit," she murmured. "Proof that even masterpieces bleed." Then, soft but certain, she whispered to the darkness, "Tomorrow the gallery opens." The next afternoon, the doorbell chimed, a sound too polite for the storm behind it. Vivian opened the door to find Brielle haloed in early sunlight, holding a pastel bakery box tied with gold ribbon. Her smile was the same polished expression she wore at fundraisers. "Chocolate chip," Brielle said sweetly. "Your favorite. Remember I felt awful about the accident." Vivian let the silence hang before replying, "You remembered wrong. But come in." The younger woman stepped into the penthouse, every movement rehearsed. Her jeans were casual, her sweater soft beige, an apology wardrobe. "I just wanted to say how embarrassed I was," Brielle began. "Everyone misread the situation. I'd never hurt you on purpose." Vivian poured 2 cups of tea, calm and slow. How thoughtful. "Tell me, Brielle, do you usually bring gifts to your victims or your investors?" The smile faltered, for half a breath, then returned stronger. "You have a sharp sense of humor. No wonder Evan adores you. I'm not joking." Vivian pushed a small recorder, halfway under a napkin, still blinking red. "You said something interesting at the gallery. About storage." Brielle's eyes flickered. "Storage? Yes. You told me vintage belongs there." A pause. "Oh, did I? I don't recall." The moment was chaotic. Vivian studied her. "You remember every brand name in that room, but not your own words." Brielle laughed lightly, the sound hollow as a dropped spoon. "I suppose I was flustered." "Of course," Vivian said. "Guilt can blur memory." The line landed like a pin drop. Brielle rose, box in hand. "I hope we can put this behind us." Vivian accepted the cookies, her smile flawless. "We already have, dear. I've moved on to research." When the elevator doors closed, she opened the box. Inside, 12 cookies, perfect and meaningless. On top, a handwritten card, "For the sweetest mother-in-law in the world." Vivian dropped it into the trash. The recorder's red light blinked once more before she switched it off. "Thank you for your performance," she murmured to the empty room. Act 2 begins tomorrow. The city slept, but Vivian's apartment glowed like a watchtower. The wine-stained jacket hung by the window, crimson now turned to rust. She sat across from it with a glass of scotch and the stillness of someone preparing a closing argument. On the table lay two photos, one of Robert smiling behind his antique camera, and one of Evan, forced smile beside Brielle at some charity brunch. Same jawline, different eyes. Robert's were bright with trust. Evan's looked trained to doubt himself. Vivian whispered to the empty room. "You'd tell me I'm being obsessive." The silence answered, "Be thorough." She exhaled, pulled her legal pad closer, and wrote across the top controlled disclosure strategy phase. She wasn't going to confront them screaming. She'd do it the way auditors dismantle corporations quietly with receipts. Let Brielle underestimate her one more time. Let Evans see both art and evidence in a single frame. Her phone buzzed. A message from her financial advisor, all transfers, moved to secure account. Good. Step 1 complete. Then an alert from her security system, new camera installed in the lobby. Step 2. She was turning her grief into infrastructure. Vivian closed her eyes and replayed the gala moment in perfect detail. The gleam of the glass, the whisper, the warmth of humiliation crawling down her chest. Emotion she thought was just data waiting to be organized. She rose, slipped on her robe, and stood before Robert's portrait. "You spent your life restoring paintings," she murmured. "Now I'll restore our son." She pressed a kiss to her fingertips and touched it to the glass. Then she turned off the lamp, leaving the room in quiet gold. Tomorrow she would invite them both for coffee. Tomorrow the exhibit would open, truth framed under perfect lighting. Vivian set the stage the way a curator sets an exhibit, every object deliberate, every light controlled. 3 cups, 1 folder. The wine-stained jacket draped across a chair like a ghost still attending. The bell rang at precisely noon. Evan entered, first followed by Brielle in soft gray, her contrition rehearsed to perfection. "Coffee." Vivian offered tone neutral. "Mom, please." Evan sighed. "Let's not start with tension." Vivian smiled faintly. "Tension is just energy misdirected, darling. Let's redirect it." She gestured toward the folder. "Brielle, I've been researching your portfolio." The younger woman tilted her head, playing innocence. "What your history?" Vivian said evenly. "Your professional, marital, and financial projects. I find your range impressive. Tennessee, Ohio, Michigan. You've collaborated with quite a few partners." Evan blinked. "What are you talking about?" Vivian slid the documents across the table. Court dockets, termination memos, a printed photo of Brielle with James Bradley, another with Marcus Chen. Brielle's voice sharpened. "You had no right." "I had every right," Vivian interrupted softly, "when the same woman who poured wine on me also drained $47,000 of my husband's legacy." Evan's face drained. 47, what? Vivian turned to him gently. "The loans, the transfers labeled temporary. You told me you were renovating your kitchen." Brielle leaned forward, fury veiled as calm. "You're twisting everything. I've worked hard for this family. Maybe you should ask yourself why your son still needs help from anyone." Vivian didn't flinch. "Because he trusts too easily. A flaw inherited from his father. But I'm here to fix that." Evan's breath came ragged. "Brielle, is any of this true?" Brielle's eyes glistened perfectly timed tears. "Evan, she's jealous. She's never forgiven me for being younger, for giving you a life outside her control. Look at her. She's orchestrating this like a drama." Vivian's voice cooled. "Drama, no curation. I present evidence. Viewers interpret." The tears vanished. The mask slipped, revealing the steel beneath. "You think you can destroy me with a few old papers? Those men deserved what they got. They used me. I just survived better." The room froze. Evan's chair scraped back as if the floor had turned to fire. "Stop," he whispered. "Both of you." Vivian studied her sun-jaw, trembling eyes flicking between love and realization. "Evan," she said quietly, "the hardest truth is that predators don't hide in shadows. They stand beside you at brunch. Brielle's breath hissed through her teeth. You'll regret this. Vivian stood gathering the folder. No, you will. Because I document everything. Evan's phone buzzed a notification from his bank. His expression changed slow horror. Vivian, he said faintly. $5,000 just withdrew from our joint account. Vivian's gaze locked on Brielle. Act 2 begins, she murmured. Brielle turned toward the elevator, but the automatic door hesitated just long enough for Vivian to see her reflection. A woman caught mid-mask, realizing the show was collapsing. When the door finally slid shut, silence bloomed like applause. Vivian sank into her chair, exhaling a tremor that was equal parts fury and relief. She whispered toward the stained jacket one frame down. The rest will hang themselves. The confrontation left the apartment vibrating in its silence. The smell of overbrewed coffee hung in the air, like evidence that refused to vanish. Vivian sat perfectly still, hands folded, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the sound of a house remembering how to breathe again. Outside the window, Manhattan glowed indifferent. Her phone blinked. Transfer confirmed $5,000 withdrawn, proof that Brielle's instinct after exposure was still theft. Predictable, efficient, stupid. Vivian opened a new note on her laptop titled Containment Protocol. Step 1, freeze joint accounts. Step 2, secure remaining assets. Step 3, move artwork to private storage. Step 4, wait. Let her panic. Hours later, movers arrived, 3 men in navy overalls, hands careful around gilded frames. They packed her late husband's paintings, cataloging each barcode, while Vivian stood supervising, face unreadable. Insurance, one asked. Updated today, she replied. The final crate sealed with metallic tape. The truck rolled away toward a climate-controlled warehouse on the Lower East Side. Vivian watched it go, the taillights shrinking into the dusk. Her phone buzzed again. Evan. Mom. She left. I don't know where she's gone. Vivian typed, don't look for her. Let her reveal herself. She poured herself a small brandy, the liquid steady as her pulse. For the first time in years, she felt both alone and entirely safe. No more pretense, no more wine stains pretending to be accidents. As midnight crept across the skyline, she walked through the now bare study. The walls, stripped of art, looked skeletal, honest. Sometimes restoration began by removing everything false. Before turning off the lights, she pinned a single note to the corkboard, Brielle Hart, Stage 2 exposure. Then she looked at Robert's photo and whispered, Your gallery's clean again, my love. Tomorrow we start hanging the truth. The call came at 2:17 a.m., a time when only guilt and emergencies knew her number. Vivian jolted upright, the ring slicing through her half-sleep like a siren. Mrs. Roth. The voice on the other end was deep official. This is Fire Chief Keller. There's been an incident at your storage facility on Delancey Street. Vivian's heartbeat didn't rise. It narrowed. What kind of incident? Smoke and partial fire damage in your section. Sprinklers contained it, but you'll need to come down for verification. She dressed in silence. Black slacks, navy coat, hair pulled tight. The air outside smelled of rain and diesel. When her driver saw her face, he didn't ask questions. The warehouse loomed like a cathedral of loss. Red and blue lights flashed against corrugated steel. Firefighters moved in and out, their gear steaming under floodlamps. Smoke curled upward, thin but acrid. Lucky night, Keller said, greeting her with soot on his cheek. If this had started 5 minutes later, we'd be scraping canvas off the floor. Vivian followed him inside. The concrete was slick with water and ash. Rows of crates stood blackened at the edges. One had split open, revealing the corner of a half-charred frame. She recognized it immediately. Robert's self-portrait, now blistered by heat. Her throat tightened, but her voice remained steady. What caused it? Keller pointed to the rear door. Accelerant traces near the loading dock. We're running samples, but it's no electrical issue. Somebody wanted it to look accidental. Do you have cameras, of course? The owner's already pulling footage. If I had to guess, entry between midnight and 1. Vivian nodded, once cold fury replacing grief. Someone had turned her art into a message. Outside reporters had already gathered, sniffing smoke and scandal. She ignored them, stepping into the dim light of dawn. Her driver handed her coffee, trembling slightly. The cup felt weightless in her hand. She called Evan. He answered groggily. Mom, what's wrong? There was a fire at the warehouse. Silence. Then, was anyone hurt? No. But something important died tonight. Her subtlety. Evan exhaled shakily. You think Brielle? I think predators get desperate when cornered. By the time she returned home, the eastern sky had bruised into pale violet. Vivian spread the photos from the facility across her desk, the melted corner of Robert's portrait, the warped crates, the soaked labels. In one image, a firefighter's glove pointed at a smear on the metal door, a faint handprint in soot, smaller than a man's. She enlarged it on her screen. Long fingers, narrow wrist, manicured nails, one chipped. A perfect signature. Vivian leaned back, whispering to the empty room. Thank you for leaving your mark again. Then she opened a new file on her laptop titled Incident Report Delancey Fire, and under Primary Suspect, she typed the name without hesitation. Brielle Hart. Outside, the first sunlight broke through smoke and mist. It glinted off the shards of glass in her desk tray, scattering tiny prisms over her face. She looked at her reflection in the window and said quietly, Restoration always starts with burning away the varnish. The precinct smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant. Two things that promised long nights. Vivian sat across from Detective Ruiz, a man whose tie was as wrinkled as his patience. On the table lay a file marked Delancey Fire. Preliminary findings. He flipped through photos of blackened crates and twisted metal. We caught a break, he said. Traffic cam picked up a van near the site. Registered to a Tony Martinez career small-time arsonist. Picked him up this morning. Vivian didn't blink. Is he talking? Not yet, Ruiz said. But give him a few hours without cigarettes and he'll sing opera. He studied her expression. You think someone hired him? I don't think, Detective. I know opportunists don't burn warehouses for nostalgia. Ruiz half smiled. You sound like you've done this before. I was married to a man who restored Rembrandts, she said. I know what deliberate damage looks like. He jotted a note. We'll bring you into ID suspects from a lineup if he gives us a name. Vivian stood. He won't need to give one. I already have it. Hushi slid a single printed photo across the table, Brielle's glossy headshot from a marketing website. Ruiz studied it, eyebrows arching. Your daughter-in-law. For now, she said. And Detective, she's predictable. Her pride always signs the crime. Ruiz leaned back, intrigued. You know, Mrs. Roth, most people in your position are shaking. Vivian met his eyes, calm as marble. Fear wastes energy. I'm saving mine for the verdict. He nodded once. We'll be in touch. Outside the station, the wind cut sharp off the river. Vivian buttoned her coat phone, vibrating in her pocket. A message from Evan. They questioned me at work. What's happening, Mom? She typed back. Justice, darling. Slow, methodical justice. Across the street, a news van idled the reporter rehearsing a line about mystery arson in an art facility. Vivian watched her reflection in the glass door of the precinct, smoke still in her hair, eyes clearer than ever. Now, she whispered, let's see which canvas burns next. Vivian had just placed her teacup on its saucer when the phone rang, an unlisted number, the kind that usually meant telemarketers or trouble. She let it ring twice before answering. Mrs. Roth. A voice slurred on the other end, still playing detective. Even muffled, she recognized the venom. Good evening, Brielle, Vivian said, tone perfectly civil. I see you're calling without your lawyer present. A bitter laugh crackled through static. You think you're clever, don't you? You ruin my marriage, poison my husband against me. Then you call the cops the first time something bad happens to you. Vivian's eyes flicked to the blinking red light on her landline recording active. Something bad happened to my property, dear. Not to me. Not yet. You don't scare me, Brielle hissed. I've been through worse than you. People forget things when money talks. Vivian leaned back in her chair, gaze resting on Robert's burned frame, leaning against the wall. Money doesn't talk, Brielle. It testifies. Silence. Then a slow inhale, ragged. You won't win, Brielle whispered, voice soft as a blade drawn from silk. I'll make sure of that. Vivian smiled faintly. You've already insured it. Every threat you make paints my case clearer. Click. The line went dead. Vivian sat for a long moment, the hum of the city a distant lullaby. Then she picked up the receiver again and dialed Detective Ruiz. Detective, it's Mrs. Roth. She just called me, threatened me. Yes, I recorded it. Keep the tape safe, Ruiz said. We'll pull her phone records. That call might be the match we need. After she hung up, Vivian turned to the window. Manhattan shimmered indifferent as ever, its lights blinking like courtroom eyes. She whispered to the glass, Thank you for calling, darling. Evidence sounds best when it incriminates itself. In the reflection, her own face looked sharper, cleaner, like steel freshly polished. She opened a new folder on her computer. Audio Exhibit A, Brielle threat call. The file uploaded with a soft chime, precise and final, as a judge's gavel. Detective Ruiz called before sunrise. Mrs. Roth, he said, voice gravelly with exhaustion, you were right. Cameras picked up the van again. We traced its route. Vivian, still in her robe, opened her laptop as he spoke. The email pinged in footage attachments, time-stamped and grainy but undeniable. On screen, the white panel van rolled through Murphy's bar parking lot at 12:38 a.m., the night of the fire. The driver, Tony Martinez. But the real detail gleamed in the reflection of the windshield, a passenger's silhouette. Smaller hair gathered high, pale sleeve flickering under the streetlight. Ruiz continued. Martinez parked for 20 minutes. Witness says a woman met him there. Cash exchanged. He's still not talking, but the security feed shows her car pulling in right after him. Vivian zoomed in. The car, a silver Audi Q5 vanity plate, blurred but traceable. She knew that car Brielle's. The irony burned colder than the fire itself. Ruiz sighed. We're subpoenaing ATM footage. There was a $5,000 withdrawal at a Midtown bank, exactly 1 hour before that meetup. 5,000, Vivian murmured. Same amount withdrawn from my son's account? Then she's sloppy, Ruiz said. And sloppy criminals hang themselves. After the call, Vivian printed every frame, arranging them along her wall like a storyboard. The van, the Audi, the handshake, the flame. Evan arrived mid-morning, pale from sleeplessness. Mom, he said, voice low. The police came by my office again. They think Brielle's involved. She is, Vivian replied simply, turning the screen toward him. He stared at the still image, Brielle's silhouette frozen beside the van, a cigarette glowing between two elegant fingers. His throat tightened. God! She really did it. Vivian's tone softened. Denial's a form of love, Evan. But love can't clean soot. He sank into the chair, running a hand through his hair. She could have killed someone. She didn't care who burned as long as it wasn't her. For a long time, they just sat there watching the silent loop. Fire smoke shadows. Then Vivian reached over, squeezed his hand. We'll give the police everything. They'll handle the law. I'll handle the narrative. The narrative, he asked. Yes. Reputation is its own kind of trial. That evening, Vivian uploaded the footage to a private cloud labeled Case Roth Tati Fireline, a digital museum of betrayal timestamps as captions crimes as art. She added one final image, her burned painting, its surface, warped into waves of crimson and black. File name, Exhibit of Truth. Before shutting her laptop, she whispered, "Thank you, Brielle, for curating your own downfall." Across town, Brielle's apartment window glowed late into the night, blinds half drawn. Inside, she packed hurriedly credit cards. Jewelry, a passport she hadn't used in years. She paused at her vanity mirror, staring at herself. The woman in the reflection looked foreign, eyes rimmed, red lipstick smeared. Her phone buzzed with a new notification: police request. Vehicle information Audi Q5. Her hands began to tremble. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere distant, low and hungry. Back in her penthouse, Vivian poured a glass of cold white wine, not for celebration, but ceremony. She raised it toward the city skyline and said, "To the truth. May it always leave a reflection." She drank, eyes fixed on the horizon, already glowing faintly orange, the color of confession. The penthouse felt colder that morning, stripped of its art and pretense. Vivian stood at the far end of the living room, a silhouette against the window, while Evan paced in tight circles. Hair unkempt, sleeves rolled up, the weight of disbelief crushing his voice. "Mom, tell me this isn't real," he said, pointing at the spread of documents covering her desk. "That photo, that van, maybe it's a mistake." Vivian didn't move. "You're an auditor, Evan. What does the evidence tell you?" He rubbed his temples. "It tells me my wife might have hired someone to burn your property, that she's been lying for years, that my whole life has been a goddamn facade. And what does your heart tell you?" He laughed bitterly. "That I don't know my own wife. Or maybe I never did." Vivian walked to the board, the same corkboard once used for restoration plans, and began peeling off notes one by one. "Do you remember what your father taught you about provenance?" He nodded slowly. "Every masterpiece carries its own paperwork." "Exactly. And forgery always leaves fingerprints." She handed him the printout of the ATM withdrawal, the timestamp aligning perfectly with the bar footage. "Her fingerprints, dear? Digital this time." Evan sank into the armchair, scanning each sheet. His jaw trembled. 47,000 from you. Another 20 from me. She said her job paid enough for rent. She lied about everything. Vivian's voice softened. Lies are a language of survival for people like Brielle. They mimic love until love becomes unrecognizable. He looked up, tears collecting in his eyes. "And what about me? What does that make me?" Vivian knelt beside him, her tone quieter than prayer. "It makes you human. Good men are never born suspicious, they have to be betrayed first." The elevator bell rang. Both froze. Evan frowned. "She doesn't have a key anymore." Vivian stood, eyes narrowing. "Unless she never returned it." The doors slid open with a muted chime, and there she was. Brielle, perfectly composed, dressed in mourning black as if she were attending her own funeral. "Evan," she said gently, "we need to talk. Alone." Vivian stepped forward. "No. Whatever you have to say, you'll say to both of us." Brielle's mask flickered, but she smiled. "Detective Ruiz called me. He said you're feeding him lies. False evidence, edited footage. He warned me how obsessed you are." Vivian folded her arms. "And yet here you are, uninvited, holding a purse big enough for an international departure." Brielle ignored the jab. She turned to Evan, voice trembling with trained sincerity. "Sweetheart, please. You know me. I could never." He cut her off, voice low but deadly. "Stop. I've seen the video. You met that man. Tony Martinez at Murphy's bar. You gave him cash. You used my account." She took a step closer. "Evan, she's manipulating you. She wants to destroy us. She didn't need to, he said. You did that yourself. For a moment, the mask cracked completely. Brielle's eyes turned sharp, calculating, no longer pretending. Fine, she snapped. You want the truth? Yes, I met Tony. He was supposed to scare her, not burn anything. I just wanted her to stop interfering. Vivian's expression remained calm, almost compassionate. And yet, you poured accelerant. Control always escalates to destruction. Dear, it's a rule of art and crime. Brielle laughed, manic-cornered. You think this makes you the hero. You've ruined your son's marriage. He'll never trust anyone again because of you. Evan whispered. You were never my wife. You were a thief wearing vows. Something in her broke then. The charm fell away, replaced by naked fury. You rich people think you can buy virtue, she spat. Your money built my lies. You wrote the checks, I just signed them. Vivian's tone dropped to surgical coldness. And now the bank is closed. Police sirens echoed faintly from the street below. Ruiz had timed it perfectly. Brielle's eyes darted toward the hallway. You called them. I didn't need to, Vivian said. You called yourself when you came here. The pounding on the door came seconds later. 3 heavy knocks. NYPD, Ms. Brielle Hart. We have a warrant for your arrest. Her composure evaporated. She lunged toward Evan, desperate. Please help me. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Evan stepped back, sir, voice hollow. You taught me what misunderstanding really means. 2 officers entered, cuffed her efficiently, while Ruiz read the charges. Arson, conspiracy, fraud. As they let her out, Brielle turned her head toward Vivian, eyes burning through tears. You'll regret this. Vivian replied softly. Regret is for the innocent. The door shut behind them with a quiet finality that felt almost merciful. Evan stood motionless. It's over, he whispered. Vivian shook her head. No, darling. The fire's out, but the smoke lingers. He looked around the stripped apartment, the empty walls, the smell of cold coffee, and exhaled. I don't even know who I am anymore. Vivian placed a hand on his shoulder. Then it's time to find out. Start fresh, rebuild honestly. Every ruined canvas begins again with primer. Outside dawn, light crept through the window, soft and forgiving. The city hummed below, oblivious to the quiet miracle of a mother and son finally standing on the same side. Vivian turned toward Robert's photo and whispered, We restored him love. He's whole again. The coffee pot hissed once more like applause from a ghost. 6 months later, the courthouse smelled of paper, perfume, and press. Vivian had dressed in quiet armor, a charcoal suit, a single pearl at her throat, calm as winter glass. Outside, reporters shouted names that no longer belonged to her billionaire widow, art heiress. She kept walking. Inside the courtroom buzzed with the same thrill people feel before a premiere. At the defense table sat Brielle, paler, thinner, her beauty reduced to angles and defiance. She wore beige, the color of denial. Her eyes searched for Evan, but found only the back of his head. Evan sat beside his mother, not as the frightened son she'd once known, but as a man, rebuilt jaw, steady posture, straight. The months had carved honesty into his bones. When the prosecutor played the recording, Brielle's voice filled the room like smoke. You don't scare me. You won't win. I'll make sure of that. The jury shifted. A single sentence could do what years of charm never could reveal truth. Then came Tony Martinez, shuffling in chains, his voice rough with regret. She paid me cash. $5 grand. Told me to torch the place but make it look accidental. Said the old lady needed a lesson. The words echoed. Vivian didn't move. She didn't need to. Every head in the room turned toward Brielle, who sat frozen mascara trembling like ink in water. Her lawyer objected, pleaded, spun the narrative of misunderstanding and emotional distress. But truth, once lit, burns stubborn. After 2 days of deliberation, the verdict arrived like a closing curtain, guilty on all counts. The judge's gavel struck wood sharp, final, liberating. Vivian exhaled for the first time in months. Evan reached for her hand, and she let him. Outside, flashbulbs burst like fireworks, but she didn't flinch. A journalist shouted Mrs. Roth any comment for the public. Vivian paused at the courthouse steps. The sky was overcast, heavy with unfallen rain. She answered softly, "Justice isn't revenge, it's restoration." The quote ran on every headline that night. Weeks later, the penthouse felt alive again. New canvases on the walls, Robert's self-portrait restored by the same hands that had once framed his work. Insurance had paid, but that wasn't the reward. Truth was, Evan stopped by every Sunday now. They cooked instead of talked about money. Sometimes he helped her water the plants that survived the smoke. "I never thanked you," he said once, "for saving me." Vivian smiled. "You did the saving, darling. I just turned on the light." On her desk sat a final file labeled Hart v. State, closed. She ran a fingertip along the folder's edge, then locked it away. Outside, a drizzle began soft and cleansing. Vivian watched it streak down the glass, each droplet tracing its own reflection. Somewhere across the city, in a correctional facility, under gray skies, Brielle watched the same rain and whispered the same truth she had once mocked. Money doesn't talk, it testifies. Vivian lifted her teacup toward the window. To the varnish stripped away, she murmured. To the art underneath. And for the first time since the wine fell, she felt clean. 6 months later, spring returned to Manhattan, as if nothing had ever burned. The rebuilt Roth Gallery reopened under a quiet name, Second Light. Vivian refused interviews, letting the art speak. The first piece in the new exhibition hung where Robert's portrait once stood. Same frame, new canvas. It showed a single streak of red fading into white. Title, Forgiven Fire. Evan arrived early that evening carrying tulips, not the cheap grocery kind this time, but pale cream, alive and deliberate. "They're for the opening," he said, smiling faintly. Vivian accepted them with the same care she once reserved for fragile glass. "I prefer flowers that bloom again," she murmured. Guests drifted through the gallery, their murmurs low, reverent. No one mentioned Brielle's name. No one dared. The scandal had become a ghost story told in hushed tones, the kind people recall only when they need a moral. After the last guest left, Evan lingered by the window overlooking the city. "She's eligible for parole in 7 years, he said softly. Vivian nodded. "Then she'll have 7 years to learn what truth feels like." He turned to her. "Do you ever regret any of it?" Vivian thought for a moment. The answer rose slow and calm like sunlight on varnish. "No. Because restoration doesn't erase the damage, it proves the peace was worth saving." Outside, the rain that had threatened all week finally began to fall, washing the glass in thin silver lines. Vivian placed a hand against the window, watching each droplet descend. Every fall was brief, but the reflection it left shimmered longer than pain. Evan joined her, silent. Mother and son stood together in the soft hum of the gallery, surrounded by art, by silence, by something that almost felt like peace. Vivian whispered, "He would have loved this, you know." Evan smiled. "He'd say you finally finished the restoration." She exhaled a sound that was half laugh, half release. "No, darling," she said, eyes glinting under the gallery lights. "I only cleaned away the smoke so we could see the frame again. And the city, alive and glimmering beyond the glass, became her final masterpiece. Morning light spilled across the penthouse, no longer cold. Vivian stood before the mirror, fastening her pearl earring, the same pair she'd worn the night the wine was spilled. The stain was gone now, professionally cleaned, not a trace of red left, but she still kept the dress hung behind glass, like an artifact of survival. The city outside pulsed awake, horns, birds' laughter rising from the street. She poured her tea, steady hands, peaceful heart. The world had moved on, yet it somehow revolved slower and now, more deliberate. On her desk sat a new letter cream envelope blue seal. From Detective Ruiz. Inside a note, handwritten in neat block letters. Case officially closed. You were right from the start. Some women age into strength. Others only pretend. Thank you for reminding us which is which. Vivian smiled faintly and folded it into her journal between two pressed tulip petals. Artifacts of another life. At noon, Evan arrived with groceries. He looked older, but lighter. They cooked together nothing fancy, just pasta garlic laughter. The simple act of boiling water felt like music after years of chaos. After lunch, he walked to the balcony and looked down at the street below. "Mom," he said, "do you ever think about what might have happened if Dad were still alive?" Vivian joined him, eyes tracing the skyline. "He'd have told me to forgive sooner," she said. But forgiveness takes time, like restoring old paint. You have to let each layer dry before touching the next. They stood in silence, watching sunlight glint off the glass towers. The same city that once hid deception now shimmered like polished truth. When Evan left that evening, Vivian lingered by the gallery wall. The painting, Forgiven Fire, caught the sunset, perfectly red, dissolving into white. She whispered to it, "Nothing real ever burns completely." Then she turned off the lights, one by one, until only the painting remained, lit her private lighthouse against the night. And as the city dimmed, Vivian Roth smiled, knowing that even after everything, the frame always survives the fire. It was a Sunday morning when the past knocked again. Not with fire this time, just a letter slipped under the gallery door. No return address, just one word written in looping blue ink remnants. Vivian found it while checking invoices. The paper was heavy, perfumed faintly, with something floral and wrong. Inside was a single photograph, a prison visiting room. Brielle, thinner, pale but unmistakable, sitting across from another woman. Her mother, Lydia Hart. On the back, written in the same blue script, "She still blames you." Vivian held the photo under the light, the shadows cutting across Brielle's face like bars. The irony struck her how some people built prisons even before they entered one. She locked the gallery doors and made tea her usual method for thinking. There was no threat, no demand, just an echo. Still, her pulse betrayed her. She'd seen too many closures reopen themselves. That evening, she called Detective Ruiz. He listened, voice steady. "Could be her mother trying to rattle you. Lydia's been writing petitions, media letters, sympathy campaigns." Vivian exhaled. Pity as a business model. How predictable. "Want me to look into it?" "No. Let her speak. I'll answer with silence. It terrifies people like them." She hung up and walked through the quiet gallery. Each painting gleamed under soft track lights, each one proof that chaos could be restored into meaning. And yet something in her chest felt unsettled, like varnish still drying. Later that night, Evan stopped by, unexpectedly windblown from the rain. He noticed the letter immediately. "Is that from her?" Vivian nodded. "Or from the ghost that keeps her company?" He frowned. "You should have told me sooner. And say what that the past sends postcards now." Evan sank onto the couch, hands clasped. "I've been seeing a therapist, Mom. They said I should forgive her, Brielle. For my own sake." Vivian studied him. "Forgiveness isn't charity, darling. It's accounting. You balance what was taken with what was learned." He half smiled. "Then I suppose I'm solvent again." For the first time, she laughed, a real, unguarded sound. Then her eyes drifted back to the photo. "Still, I wonder why her mother sent it now." Lydia's timing was always strategic. Evan's phone buzzed a news alert. He glanced at it, froze. Mom, you should see this. Headline: Convicted arsonist Brielle Hart granted early release pending review. The subhead made Vivian's tea turn cold. Possible new evidence surfaces, case under reconsideration. She read it twice, then set the cup down carefully. They've found a way to repaint the crime, she murmured. Evan's voice rose. That's impossible, she confessed. No, Vivian corrected gently. She explained. Confession requires remorse. By nightfall, the story was everywhere. Talk shows debated the wealthy widow's influence, tabloids whispered about corrupt art money, and planted evidence. Lydia Hart had found her canvas, and the world, hungry for drama, was once again painting Vivian as the villain. Ruiz called again. Press got hold of something, claims the van was stolen before the fire. Some blogger says the evidence was tampered with. Vivian's tone stayed calm. You don't believe that? Of course not. But public opinion doesn't need truth, Mrs. Roth. It just needs a headline. That night, for the first time since the trial, Vivian dreamed of fire again. Only this time, it wasn't her gallery burning. It was her reputation, each newspaper page curling at the edges. She woke before dawn, sweat cooling fast. The city outside shimmered, indifferent as ever. She went to her desk, pulled out the old corkboard, the same one that had once mapped Brielle's deceit. Slowly, she pinned the new article beside the prison photo. At the top, she wrote a single word in red ink, open. Vivian Roth had lived through humiliation, betrayal, and flames. She had rebuilt her name with patience and precision. But now they were coming for the frame again. And as she stared at the photo of Brielle's smirk in that prison chair, a quiet resolve settled into her bones. If she wants a second act, Vivian whispered, then I'll write the script. Outside, thunder rolled across Manhattan like applause. The air smelled faintly of rain, and smoke remembered. By Monday morning, the city had turned her life into spectacle again. Vivian's name trended on every screen, millionaire matriarch framed innocent woman. Arson case under fire. TV anchors smiled politely while dismantling her dignity. She watched from her kitchen robe tied perfectly, expression unreadable. Evan stormed in, phone buzzing nonstop. Mom, this is insane. They're saying Tony confessed to acting alone. Vivian poured coffee steady, as always. Confessions are like mirrors, darling. They show whatever the beholder wants to see. He frowned. They're twisting everything. You can't ignore this. She handed him a folded paper, the New York Chronicle. Front page, Lydia Hart, sitting outside a courthouse, face perfectly tragic. Headline: Mother pleads for daughter's redemption. Vivian's voice was measured, surgical. She's rewriting the narrative. Turning guilt into art. Clever, really. Evan slammed the paper down. So what now? We just let them destroy you again. Vivian met his eyes. No. We curate the truth again. That afternoon, she called Detective Ruiz. He sounded weary. The DA's reviewing the old evidence. Media pressure's strong. They'll want you to comment. I will, she said. But not to defend myself, to remind them what's already proven. Within hours, Vivian stood before a wall of microphones at the steps of her gallery. Dozens of reporters waited, rain glinting off umbrellas. Her pearl earrings caught the light, her voice calm as polished steel. I have nothing to hide, she said. Justice was served once and will be again. But remember, this smoke only returns when people keep feeding it oxygen. The soundbite spread instantly. Some called her cold, others called her brilliant. Either way, she was back in control of the frame. That night, she drafted a letter to the Attorney General requesting public release of all trial records, every photo, every audio file, every bank receipt. If Lydia wanted spectacle, Vivian would give her the full exhibit. And when she sealed the envelope, she smiled faintly. Round 2, she whispered, and I still own the gallery. 3 days after her public statement, The air outside Second Light Gallery pulsed with reporters, flashbulbs, and whispers. Vivian had become a paradox half-villain, half-legend. But this time, she'd come prepared not to react, but to orchestrate. Inside the gallery's glass atrium, her legal team arranged rows of documents on long tables, bank statements, signed testimonies, police photographs. Each one stamped, "Released under FOIA," the Freedom of Information Act request she had filed herself. At noon, sharp, the doors opened. Cameras flashed like lightning. Vivian stepped forward, elegant and unshaken. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "truth doesn't fear sunlight. So today, I am turning on every light." She motioned to Ruiz, who stood nearby in plain clothes, an unofficial ally now. He nodded subtly. Behind her, a screen flickered to life footage of Tony Martinez's testimony, time-stamped and verified. "She paid me cash. Told me to torch it. Said the old lady needed a lesson." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The headline reversal began in real time. Vivian continued, voice calm, controlled. "There has been talk of tampering, of bias, of influence. So I invite the world to audit me. Every receipt, every photo, every voice recording is now public. You may inspect the art, the ashes, and the truth for yourselves." Her press officer distributed digital drives, one for each major network. The journalists, startled, murmured their thanks. Lydia Hart, watching from a live feed across town, froze mid-interview as the footage replayed on every channel. Within hours, the narrative flipped again. Hashtag shifted from "Not Our Free Brielle" to "The Evidence Speaks." Editorials retracted, pundits stuttered. By evening, Ruiz called. "You just pulled off what most lawyers can't in court: total transparency." Vivian's voice was soft. The courtroom was too small for the truth detective. "I needed a gallery." That night, Evan found her standing in front of Forgiven Fire. The red streak seemed to glow brighter alive under the low lights. "You won," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "I corrected the record. Winning was never the goal, clarity was." He smiled faintly. "They'll study you one day, you know." "The woman who turned scandal into sculpture," she chuckled. "Then let them learn the only rule I ever lived by: when someone sets a fire, don't run curate the smoke." Outside, the crowd had thinned the air clean again. In the reflection of the gallery glass, Vivian Roth no longer looked like a victim or an avenger, just an artist who had mastered truth's most dangerous medium reputation. Dawn slipped through the gallery's skylight, soft and clean. The air smelled faintly of paint and rain. Vivian stood before Forgiven Fire, coffee in hand, no makeup, no armor, just a woman who had finally outlasted her storm. For the first time, the painting looked complete. The red no longer screamed. It breathed. The headlines had quieted. Lydia Hart's campaign dissolved under the weight of released evidence. Brielle's appeal was denied. The world, always hungry for chaos, had moved on. Evan entered quietly, setting down a newspaper. The front page read, "Vivian Roth, the woman who framed the truth." He smiled. They got the title right this time. Vivian took the paper, folded it neatly, and placed it under a vase of tulips. "No frame lasts forever," she said. "But the light, if you build it right, does." Outside, the city shimmered awake. Delivery trucks, laughter, a violin from the subway below, all part of the same rhythm that had once drowned her silence. Now it sounded like music again. Evan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "What now?" he asked. Vivian smiled faintly. "Now we restore other people's fires." She turned off the gallery lights one by one, until only the skylight remained, a single square of gold resting on her son's face. In that fragile silence, Vivian whispered to herself, "No more smoke, only light." And for the first time, she believed it. How did this story touch you? Tell us in the comments and rate it from 1 to 10. If it moved your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Tap the so you won't miss our next emotional story. And before you go, click on the end screen to discover more powerful, heartwarming tales waiting just for you. See you in the next story.